Let's talk about war-themed dramas. Being American, we only get very old kinds of films, given the fact that most of us alive here haven't seen a war in our own homeland. I've always admired these kinds of films being able to tell a very detailed and personal story during a war and only using the war as an element for the film. There are a lot of shocking ones out there that have gained popularity with the disturbing film fans, but let's go over one that has gone under our radar. The 1979 Best Foreign Film of the Year, The Tin Drum. Now, it was very popular back in its day, but now I just don't see anyone talking about this film, so let's give it some much needed attention. But before I get started, I just want to make a quick disclaimer that a lot of spoilers are coming your way, so just in case anybody hasn't seen the film, you may want to. Additionally, this film is pretty controversial regarding underage actors engaging in sexual activity, and it does get a bit political, so if those are topics that make you uncomfortable, you may want to exit the video. And for those of you sticking around, thank you so much. Let's waste no more time and get on with the movie. Here we are in the early 20th century, located in the free city of Danzig. We meet our main character Oscar, who is brought into this world during a very dangerous time and probably one of the last places you'd want to be at. Oscar is our main focus, and he has an interesting background and some unique characteristics. From his mother's side, Agnes, he is part Polish, and his grandfather was not in good terms with the German government. We are going to see his entire life, from its many adventures, all the way from his birth to the very end of World War II. The first thing to note of Oscar is that when he turned 3 years old, his mother gets him a drum, and from that moment on, he and that drum are inseparable. The tin drum is supposed to have some symbolic meaning. It's supposed to cause disturbance or make protest to something that may upset Oscar. There are a few examples of that in this movie, and sometimes they're actually unintentional, so whether Oscar wants to protest or not, if he uses the drum, it'll cause some type of turmoil. Let's put some focus on Oscar's home life and what his family is like. They seem quite typical at first view, but Oscar sees them as drunks, immature, and little to no ambition. His father Alfred owns a little grocery store while his mother comes from farming. This makes him not want to grow up anymore, and by mere desire he can do that. He just throws himself down the stairs. He's able to look like this for the remainder of the film. Yeah, all he had to do was choose not to grow. Don't ask why, just accept this fact. He may no longer grow on the outside, but mentally he's actually quite advanced for his age. He's able to understand a lot more than what people around him credit him for, and with that he's able to see a lot of things that they would want to keep secret since he's too little to understand. Apart from his lack of growth, Oscar has one interesting skill, and that's ability to break glass from his high-pitched scream. This allows him to become famous among the town, but it also comes with bad publicity. He is also viewed as an outcast from the other children who love to bully him. At this point, he's really struggling to find a sense of belonging since he isn't liked by other kids, he doesn't think like his family, and he's viewed as a burden to them since he isn't growing. Now, due to my inexperience with war-themed dramas, I did assume that a lot of this film would have focused on politics or social issues, but it does keep it moderate and remains very personal in the lives of Oscar and his family, and boy are they a mess. So to give you a rundown on everything wrong with them, let's start with the fact that neither Oscar nor Agnes are sure who the real father is. They live under Alfred's roof, but Agnes is secretly having an affair with her cousin Jan, who's like best friends with Alfred even before he got married to Agnes. Their affair never does actually end, and with Oscar being underestimated by his young appearance to not be able to understand what's going on, they openly show it in front of him, which does have consequences. Oscar develops a distorted view of sexuality, and because he remains looking like a 3-year-old, he'll never be able to talk about this, nor will he be included in more adult conversations. In their eyes, he's still innocent, but let me tell you, there is nothing innocent about this kid. Now getting back to the story, let's go over an example of the drum's symbolism and the vibe of the film. Now earlier I mentioned that Oscar had an ability to make glass break with his high-pitched scream. He only discovers this when Alfred tries to take away his drum in order to finally have some peace and quiet around the house. Knowing that he can destroy lots of valuable items if they piss him off, Oscar basically earns his freedom pass that he can do what he wants when he wants and no one can do anything about it. His obsession with his drum and lack of cooperation with others make it impossible for him to be social, especially at school, when he can't learn a thing because he just won't obey his teacher. In fact, he even does this to her just for trying to take away his drum since she can't do her job with all the racket. Not even private tutors can help him because he just wants to do whatever he pleases, and anyone who says otherwise will pay dearly for it. This story has its twist of peculiar sexuality and dark humor, and quite a bit of irrationality to make it something of a special viewing to say the least. This is a film that I just think people need to know exists. I can't say that I recommend this or the book. They were both highly rated in its prime, plenty of controversy surrounding both, more so with the book considering it was blacklisted. I just think that's an excellent addition to anyone who is a fan of dark and disturbing films that just don't offer shock value like a Serbian film does. But I'm getting a bit off topic and should get back to the story, and let me tell you, it only gets more strange and dark as we continue. Some of this won't make any sense or it'll have a lack of explanation. It's not that I skipped over anything or you missed something important. There are just some things in this that happen, you just have to take it as it is. Now after all this time of not fitting in, even with his own family, Oscar finally does make one friend, and they are someone who actually sees his ability to break glass with his voice as art and talent. His name is Bebra, another man who also chose to stop growing at a young age. He has a successful gig at a circus and would be more than happy if Oscar joined him. Oscar may not love his home life, but he's not ready to leave it all behind and would rather just watch him from the stands. There's a bit of foreshadowing going on here. Bebra warns him that there's going to be changes with the new rising power in Europe, and all who look like they do and do not fit the model of the future, well, they'll be soon disposed of. And they must be entertainers for those in power. They must prove their use to them in whatever way they can unless they desire to be exterminated. So he leaves the offer open for Oscar to join them whenever he feels ready. And trust me, it doesn't take Oscar very long to decide to join Bebra and his group of performers because things really begin to go south in his home and in the city of Danzig. At Oscar's home, the love triangle amongst Alfred, Agnes, and Jan is the main issue. It's becoming more difficult for Jan and Agnes to hide their feelings for one another. Agnes is just getting more miserable each day into her marriage, and it's only Oscar that's keeping her from leaving. And just to be sure that things can be as unfortunate as possible, she finds out that she's pregnant. No doubt it's Jan's son since Alfred and her don't do it anymore. She knows that this is the end. And I am not kidding you, when she is overwhelmed by all the drama, she just drops dead. There's never an explanation, she just dies in her sadness. And I will admit, it does bug me how there's no detail to it. I know in films realism will be distorted or the laws of nature will be suspended at times to make the story flow. But here it feels like they didn't even try. At least a little effort, guys. I mean, you just killed off a very important character. An explanation wouldn't really hurt, but I'm just nitpicking here. We're now witnessing Danzig, which in the beginning of the film was openly peaceful for all people of all backgrounds to live together, help each other's businesses flourish, and open to intertwining each other's families. Now it's become more one model, one concept, one image. You're either with us or against us. Your background, your culture, the things that make you unique and help develop your character have no value. While I mentioned there was a lot of dark humor and more subtle family drama, the film will always take a random turn and become serious again. Getting back to the plot, Oscar loses Jan next when the rebellions in the Polish post office fight back to the Nazis. They were obviously outnumbered and underarmed, so the Nazis had no issue blowing them through. And the sad thing is that Jan's death was totally preventable. He only went to the post office because Oscar ran in there first, looking for someone who can fix their drum. That man was potentially your father, and you sent him to his death for the sake of your drum? His attachment to this damn thing is not exaggerated. Only now having his grandmother and his possible father Alfred, a moment of goodness arises when he meets a new girl named Maria, who is hired to work at the family store and will live there too. They are actually the same age at this point, and Oscar for the first time has fallen in love, and he takes his first path towards exploring attraction and sexuality. This is where the film's controversy mostly stems from, because they do engage in sexual activity. The actor that plays Oscar, David Bennett, was only 11 at the time, while the actress Maria was much older. I know that in Europe the age of consent laws are more lax than here in America, but other countries too demanded that there be a censored version with these scenes cut out. For the most part, it's more suggestive than graphic, but there is one scene that is definitely uncomfortable and I had to skip over it. It goes to say that even putting Nazism aside, it's still a movie that can make you uncomfortable. While Oscar has a new glimmer of hope by having Maria in his life, that bubble is quickly popped when he finds out that Alfred is also having intimate relations with her. I really don't have the proper words to explain this scene when Oscar walks in on them doing it, but I can't decide if this was supposed to be serious or actually supposed to be a funny scene. Let's break it down and I'll let you decide. Apparently they've been at it for a while, and they have never been taking any precautions, just hoping that Alfred exits before he climaxes, so Oscar, being the little deviant runt that he is, comes up with an idea to get his revenge on them for breaking his heart. Oscar stays hidden while they're still doing it, and when he sees that Alfred is about to be done, he sneaks behind and forces Alfred to stay inside and finish inside Maria. I know, it's just a movie. But who honestly comes up with this? How do you think this up from scratch? And to anybody who has actually read the book, is this in it also? I'm really curious to find out. After Oscar's unorthodox manner of revenge, Maria is now pregnant. She decides she will marry Alfred and she will now be part of the family. I mean, good job there, Oscar. You really showed them. Now you get to spend your life in your home watching the woman you love be with another man and have a baby with them. And this shows us again how miserable his home life is. Oscar's the age of a man now, and you can see how his family still see him as just a child, always excluded from the conversations, how those close to him still have that patronizing manner towards him as if he's helpless. And now it's time for Oscar to leave his home life behind and search for Bebra to find a place where he feels a sense of belonging and is respected. It turns out to be a very good choice since Bebra's gig is now a huge success and is still open for Oscar to join them and reap the rewards of his business. So how is Bebra even able to have a successful business with the Nazi regime just killing off people for having a special condition? Well, it's simple. If you can't join them, then you just have to entertain them. Just be a freak show for them. Bebra and his gang are currently on a tour all over Europe to get some fun performances for all the Nazis. It's not so much a circus anymore, but rather more theatrical, to provide some cheering up to these people during wartime. These events range from very elegant parties filled with high-ranking officers who fearlessly serve by sitting behind a desk, to the lower-ranking enlisted folks who are actually out there where the war is happening. Bebra and his friends will go on the battleground itself to get the soldiers going because you can't commit genocide with morale being low. They are actually adored by the Nazis, even though if it weren't for the fact that they're performers, they would have put their asses in gas chambers for their condition, but hey, who am I to judge? Even here there's a lot of humor thrown in. It doesn't matter what the situation is, this film just likes to include some morbid jokes. If you see Todd Solondz films like Happiness or Welcome to the Dollhouse, you'll know what I'm talking about, with these shocking or depressing themes having this cynical comedic tone mixed in. And while Oscar is engaging in lighthearted events, finally found a place where he feels valued and even finds a new love, he cannot escape the horrors of war. He once again loses another loved one, and this feeling of despair and helplessness and lack of belonging overtake him again. As all who knows history, it was only a matter of time before the tides turn and the Allies begin to regain ground in Europe. And when the Nazis lose favor in Europe, then so does Bebra and his business, and they have no choice but to flee. And at this point where the momentum of the war shifted, suddenly all the comedy, no matter how dark, fades away. Yes, this film is viewed in the perspective of someone who sided with the Nazis, and this narrative could put you off, but the author of the original novel isn't trying to make a plea case for the Nazis. I can understand the narrative, and being realistic with how people were in the area during this time. Just like Oscar, Bebra, and the rest, they simply had no choice if they wanted to live. There was no logical reason for them to go against a cause that would see them dead if they opposed it. They would rather be servants for entertainment rather than be sent to the chambers along with everyone else. It's odd that when the Allies, the actual good guys of this calamitous event finally retake Europe, there are no longer any funny moments in the film. But I guess that proves how the film sticks to the narrative being viewed in the eyes of those who are either brainwashed or more incentivized into joining the Nazis. But here is the tragedy. It's a sad lost cause, but either perspective still shows the ugliness of war and how it doesn't discriminate with who suffers from it. Bebra knows that it's time to call the gig off and for him and Oscar to part ways to start a new beginning. It's supposed to be a happy separation, but in my opinion it's unsatisfying for me, because neither of them actually learned from this. They only seek what's most convenient at the moment. Despite seeing so much death and destruction, they only seem upset that they're on the losing side. But now Oscar has finally returned home after many years. Let's see how it is now. Alfred and Maria are still married with their son, now the same age as Oscar was when he first received his drum, and so Oscar chooses to pass it down to him. The only thing that has really changed in the house is the depressing vibe that has taken over. Before Oscar left, Alfred and the family felt on top of the world. Alfred had a new wife, the Nazi control was spreading fast across Europe, he had a child he was certain was his, and had no abnormalities like Oscar did that would make him unfit for the German model. It was high times back then, but now Oscar's back is against the wall, and without Bebra's protection, Oscar is now a target who by Alfred's oath is supposed to turn him into the Gestapo. The fall of Nazism here is a tragedy, a death to tradition, the end of brotherhood. Alfred had built with others, he worked so hard and gave his allegiance to everything about this, and now it stands on the edge of oblivion. Yeah, can't say I feel too bad for the guy. It just cracks me up how the Allies securing the area of Danzig is viewed so negatively, even though the Nazis did the exact same thing in the beginning, but apparently that was just necessity. Alfred is killed in the process of hiding any material that could expose him as a Nazi. The funny thing is that Oscar actually bears some responsibility to this. I knew he'd redeem himself someday. And alas, we're at the end of the film. The Allies have won, Nazi Germany has surrendered, and Ola Dingus McGee took the coward's way out. So what now? For us Americans, it would be the end right here. We get to see the troops go home to their family and friends who are safe, their homes and businesses that are untouched from battle. But here, this is not the case for these people. This is their home. The horror doesn't end even if there is no more fighting. It's time to bury the dead, clean the rubble, and plan what new beginnings is to come. This is such a depressing ending. I had forgotten that there was comedic elements in this film, but I'm glad that they aren't trying to make any jokes about this part. Another interesting thing is seeing many survivors of the camps being released back into society. Many didn't have a place to go anymore, so they've been sent to foreign lands to find a new beginning. In this case, we meet a man who was still clearly affected by everything. He still sees his dead wife and children, and now he is assigned to help out the family shop from which Oscar's grandmother is now in charge of. Danzig is changing. It is to be prioritized for Holocaust survivors to find their feet again, and so others must move and make room for them as they try to rebuild whatever is left of society. And the film ends with Oscar being forced onto a train, stripped away from his grandmother's arms, and leaving us only to wonder what will now become of his life. I can't really describe how I feel about this film. It's a perspective of World War II and Nazism I haven't seen, which that in itself deserves some merit. And guys, believe me, this is not a pro-Nazi film, nor is it trying to say that the wrong side won the war. This film just followed the perspective of someone who lived in Danzig during this period of time, like the author of the novel. I'm not going to attempt to say his name, I know I'm going to get it wrong. Sorry to anybody who was hoping they could correct me and claim intellectual superiority. But anyways, he actually admitted to serving for a few years for the military branch of the Nazis, though he did have a change of political belief after the war, or he was just never vocal about it. He went on to join the SDP, which prior to joining them, they were the only party that actually had the balls to vote against the Enabling Act of 1933, which is what gave Hitler tyrannical authority, and that act of rebellion earned the SDP a one-way ticket to exile until the Nazis' fall. I don't know to what degree this film holds true to the book, but I think since most of my audience is from the United States, just know this is not a pro-Nazi, it's not even pro-war. The main thing that sticks out to me about this film is the absurdity and the comedy it has. It doesn't feel out of place, and I'm surprised how they mixed it so well in such a serious and dark period of time. Oscar's character is hard for me to make out. In many parts I want to say he's smart and more developed in his early years than most kids, but in other scenes he seems to have no emotional control, sometimes oblivious, and he switches from bad guy to victim. A good example is this scene in the post office during the resistance before World War II officially kicked off. He is watching the walls surrounding him being destroyed by Nazi forces. He watches a man die before his eyes. But what is he worried about? The dust that got on his drum. He has no regard for anything else. I mean, you gotta prioritize the important stuff first, right? He's a type of flawed protagonist that I have not seen before. I get mixed feelings about feeling sympathy for him for all that he has gone through, but he has also done his fair share of damage to others on a personal level. But maybe that's the trait that makes him realistic. One of my earlier critiques about the film was how there wasn't an explanation for some things. Well, the author embraces something known as magic realism, which kind of explains itself. I respect that they included that in the film as well, but in my opinion the approach didn't really work for me. I guess I just prefer where there can be some explaining. It's not an inherently bad thing, it's just a personal preference. Perhaps magic realism works better as a concept for a novel instead of a film. My only real complaint with this film is using of child actors for sexual scenes. I understand it's a different country, different time period, but come on. David Bennett was only 11. Like, it's not right to make someone so young do it. I'm not interested in the "but it's art" excuse. There's no requirement to do so. I've seen my fair share of films dealing with young characters, coming of age and exploring things like sexuality. In those films, they don't make the child do anything explicit, but instead present something suggestive so the viewer can piece it together. Many times they cast older actors who appear younger, or if they don't, they switch them out with doubles during an explicit scene. It doesn't dilute the effect. And trust me, for filmmaking, they are not short on resources to find someone to fix this sort of problem. Guys, it's a well-made film, and it was a unique experience. It's the reason why I'm making this video in the first place. I just don't think they needed to use a child actor for these sex scenes. I can explain it myself as much as I want. I know inevitably I'm going to piss someone off, but to whoever that is, you chose to hear my opinions of this film. If you do want to watch this, it is available on HBO Max or for a few dollars rented on Amazon Prime. But beware, both are uncensored versions. This review was not like my more recent ones for, say, The Tree of Life, Jude, or Elephant, where those films had a more under-the-surface meaning, a more detailed story to explain about. I felt that this film was more of a raw viewing. What you saw is what you get, so it was more of a reactionary review. I felt that was the better approach. And if you agree with me and you actually enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button. It helps the channel out a lot. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope to see you guys again next week. Take it easy and take care.